I am here with Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran. Alexander, we have a lot of news to get to on what's going on with Turkey and with Russia, with Damascus entering Manbij, and they've raised a flag there. We understand that there were some Israeli airstrikes over the Christmas holiday as well. And we've got a very intricate, very complicated, very dangerous situation that's happening in the north of Syria. We also have the issue with the Kurds. And I know in the U.S. mainstream media and a lot of the Western mainstream media, the narrative is now, who's going to save the Kurds now that Trump has pulled out? What's Damascus going to do? What's Russia going to do? And of course, I think the big wild card in all of this is Erdogan and Turkey. And we know that tomorrow there's going to be a big meeting. We're actually filming this on Friday, so tomorrow will be Saturday over the weekend. So we'll see what's going to happen when the Turks do meet with the Russians in Moscow. Give us an update as to what's going on in this very tense situation in the Middle East.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right, first of all, to say it's incredibly intricate. Now, what I think we need to understand is that if we go back to September, it looked as if there was going to be a major conflict there, but the policy, US policy at that time was at least clear. It was to create a quagmire for the Russians and to extend the situation in the Middle East, this conflict in this region, as long as possible, to bog down the Russians and to enable the US to engineer its long-standing objective of achieving some sort of regime change or regime movement in Damascus. And, of course, also to get the Iranians out. Now, what then happened was along comes Donald Trump. He throws the whole game upside down, and all the various parties who had not realized that this was going to happen are now scrambling. They're all desperately trying to work out where this game is going, and they're all looking frantically for ways to position themselves for maximum advantage and at the same time to try to prepare themselves for the reality of the United States leaving and of this long-standing conflict which has gone on for so many years coming to an end. So what you're seeing is this. You're seeing Damascus sending its troops into the Kurdish regions, occupying this town Manbij, which was an objective of the Turkish military, which has also been talking about advancing into the Kurdish regions. Israel has launched its own air raid onto Damascus in an attempt to reassert itself and to show everybody that it is still a big player in the game. And what all the various parties are now doing, the Turks, who are sending a huge delegation to Moscow tomorrow, that's to say on Saturday, with talk that Erdogan himself may be going to Moscow very soon. The Kurds, who are also sending apparently a delegation to Moscow, and the Syrians and the Israelis who talk to Moscow all the time, they're all now looking to the Russians to try to broker some kind of compromise to get this thing moving in a direction which will to some extent secure everybody's interests and at the same time prevent a smash. Because I think there is that possibility for a smash, unfortunately, is still there. There could be a conflict between the Turks and Damascus's troops in the Kurdish regions. And, of course, there's also these bombing raids that Israel is doing over Damascus itself, which are causing great concern. Last but not least, there are the Arab states that now realize that this regime change agenda is not going to happen. The government in Damascus is not going to change, and they are frantically trying to mend their bridges with Damascus. So we see the president of Sudan going there. There's talk that the president of Mauritania is going to go to Damascus also. And most important of all, the United Arab Emirates has opened an embassy in Damascus, and there is talk of Damascus being invited back into the Arab League. So huge amounts of things going on, everybody trying to maneuver frantically for position, Moscow holding all the threads.
The smash It sounds to me like if something does happen, if it does happen, I believe in the end of the day, I really do believe in Russian diplomacy. I mean,
Yes.
we've talked about this in the past, and Russian diplomacy is top notch, and they've managed the situation well up to this point. So I believe that they will come through. But in case they don't, and Erdogan being as unpredictable as he is, the smash is going to hit the Turks. Is going to hit the Kurds the hardest. Correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the Kurds have disastrously overplayed their hand. They overplayed it in Iraq disastrously, where they relied on the US in order to try to forge a kind of autonomous Kurdish statelet in northern Iraq. And they've now tried to do the same in the Kurdish regions, which are claimed as by Damascus as part of Syria's national territory. So they hopelessly overplayed their hand, and now they're forced, it seems to me, to come to terms with Damascus, hoping that the Russians will broker a compromise for them. And that's really the only thing they have left. If the Russians can't do that, then they're left to deal with the armies of Turkey and conceivably of Damascus on their own, and they're not going to be left with very much.
What do you make of the reports that Turkey is amassing its forces on the border, ready to enter areas like Manbij, in order to? Because I think the main premise in all of this is that the Turks cannot allow the Kurds any sort of autonomous presence in the region. And so, what do you make of the reports that Turkey is ready to step in and stop the Kurds from organizing any type of statelet in the Middle East?
Yes, I think it's entirely likely, and I think all the facts suggest that that is indeed what is happening. Also, there are reports that the various militant groups that Turkey sponsors, which are in control of Idlib province, which is this main area now for the militant groups that still continue to exist in Syria, that they are being mobilized to threaten Manbij also. So we've seen Damascus sending its troops to Manbij in a huge hurry to try to avert that advance, but there is a very real possibility that that advance could still happen and that there could be a big clash. Now, Erdogan, if he is wise, has a possible solution to this, because you're quite right. The overriding interest that Turkey has is to prevent a Kurdish autonomous, semi-independent statelet emerging on Turkey's southern border, which could act as a base area for Kurdish separatists within Turkey itself. Now, Damascus has no wish to see a Kurdish statelet on its territory being established either. So there is the potential for a compromise there. Damascus and Ankara could come together and agree that, in fact, it will be Damascus that will move into these areas and reassert its control. And at the same time, the Russians could provide reassurances to both Turkey and to the government in Damascus that it will ensure that this happens painlessly, whilst assuring the Kurds also that they will be provided with some measure of autonomy, far less than what they've been hoping for, but that it will continue, and that they won't face retribution from the Turks and indeed from the authorities in Damascus, who, though the Kurds have never fought, they have nonetheless angered on many occasions by their attempts to maneuver with the US.
Where is Iran in all of this? Because we did mention opening up this video that Israel did attack over the Christmas holiday in order, I mean, the premise was in order to kind of send a message to Iran. So is Iran involved in any of this, or what's going to be happening over the weekend between Russia and Turkey? Or is Iran a whole separate issue, and that's something that Russia is going to have to deal with diplomatically to discuss with Israel and with Iran on a whole separate front?
Right. Now, Iran is a major player in this conflict. It has been one of the major supporters of the government in Damascus throughout the conflict. It was there before the Russians moved in, and it is still there, and they still have major interests. Now, it is important to say, just to complicate this even further, Turkey and Iran have very good relations. So the Iranians and the Turks actually get on quite well with each other, except on this issue of the fact that they've chosen opposite sides in this conflict, with the Turks wanting to achieve regime change in Damascus and the Iranians being the major supporters of Damascus. I think that the Iranians will play a very quiet, long game, as they always do. They will let the Russians do the heavy lifting in the diplomacy over the next few days, because they have no particular interest in getting involved in all of that, and no particular leverage over the parties to get them to agree, whereas the Russians do, whilst at the same time they will be making very clear to the authorities in Damascus that they are ultimately the country that came to their rescue when things were really bad. They were there before the Russians were, and they will be reminding the government in Damascus that all these overtures that they're now getting from the Arab states, from Mauritania, from Sudan, which are clearly acting as messengers for Saudi Arabia, that Saudi Arabia was the enemy of the government in Damascus, Iran was its friend, and that it is in Damascus's own interests that it sticks with its true friends. So I think that will be the advice the Iranians are giving. The Israeli thing is another thing again, because, of course, the Israelis are demanding that Iran pull out entirely. I think that makes it even more likely that they will stay, because I think both Tehran and Damascus do not wish to be seen being pushed around by the Israelis.
So then how will Israel react? Because the way Israel reacts can also dictate a lot of how the United States is going to react.
It is in some ways, I think Israel is the greatest wild card, perhaps more so than Turkey is, because, of course, the other thing that's happening in Israel is that there's a political crisis there. There's elections. The Israeli government doesn't look very stable at the moment, and Benjamin Netanyahu is under an awful lot of pressure, with criminal charges having been brought against him. So he's got lots of things to concern himself with, and he does not want to be seen a loser in this conflict, with the Russians and the Iranians, but especially the Russians, pushing Israel out of a region where Israel considers itself to be the paramount power. So I think that they will be trying to find ways to reassert themselves. And I'm afraid this air raid, which we just saw over Damascus, was only one example of this. And I suspect we're going to see more of that happening. And it is a very reckless and very dangerous game, because, as you rightly said, and it has not been denied, it seems that the Israeli aircraft were actually hiding behind two commercial jets in order to launch their air raid. And that, of course, puts civilians at the line of fire.
Okay, so we have these meetings taking place over the weekend. When will things start to clear up? Are they going to clear up immediately after these meetings? Are we going to know whether Turkey's going to act, whether they're not going to act, if they're going to invade, the situation with the Kurds? Or are we looking at a longer kind of timetable here before we understand how all of these parties are going to react to what essentially is, I don't want to say a vacuum, because, the mainstream media loves to say, oh, Trump is going to leave a vacuum. He's not leaving a vacuum.
No, but it's not a vacuum.
It's definitely the pullout of the United States has prompted a lot of these players to rethink their positions and to kind of come to the table again and renegotiate how they're going to handle the situation.
I personally expect that it will all be over, one way or the other, within 1 or 2 weeks. I think it'll be very fast, because it is in everybody's interests to resolve this situation quickly. I don't mean that the whole conflict will be over, but I think the major pressure over what will happen in the Kurdish regions will be settled very soon. And what I think you will also see is Damascus moving more of its troops, not just east of the Euphrates, but into these holdout regions near Deir ez-Zor, where various militant groups are still a real danger. I think that we are in the end game of the Syrian conflict. That is my view.
And finally, to close it out, to get more towards the false flag part of this equation, because that's a whole nother piece to the puzzle, that there are a lot of people who are saying, okay, there may be another chemical attack false flag in order to prevent the U.S. from leaving the area. Of course, you mentioned the Israeli jets hiding behind the commercial airlines. That's a risk, a very dangerous risk of some type of false flag. What about the false flag, Alexander, the attempt of the U.S. to try and, instead of diffuse the situation between Turkey, between Damascus, between the Kurds, Iran, Israel, instead of trying to diffuse it, they actually try to incite some sort of conflict so that the U.S. can reinsert itself into the situation?
It is a huge possibility. There is a very, very big risk of this. And not just the US. I mean, British intelligence has a large presence in the area. The Russians have previously accused British intelligence of being behind some of these false flag attacks. I'm not saying that's true, by the way. I don't know. There's also the French are there also. Lots of people are there. But the principal power that is there on the ground is Turkey. And does Turkey want to complicate this situation even more than he is, and antagonize the Russians, with whom it seems that Turkey is trying to broker a compromise by allowing a false flag attack to happen? I don't know. It is a real danger with the people who are involved. One cannot discount that possibility at all. There will be groups within the United States that would welcome a pretext to reinsert the United States, to embarrass Donald Trump by doing it. But I suspect that the Turks will be giving advice to all the militant groups that Turkey does not want to see this happen, and that if they do such a thing, Turkey will not be pleased and will not support them, and Turkish influence may be just strong enough to prevent it.
All right, very powerful forces as well in the United States that are very upset with Trump's pullout in Syria. So I'm sure they'll be trying their damn best to make sure that this does not happen.
They'll be pulling every string. They will be using every single asset they have, assets both in the region and, of course, within the United States itself. Of that, there is no question at all, because this is a very high-stakes game for them. If the conflict ends, if peace returns, if there is a stable government in Damascus, not only will regime change failed for the first time since it was first launched back in the 1990s, these regime change wars, with all that implies for the power of the United States, but even more disastrously for them, if there is a successful peace which the United States attempted to prevent happening, it is going to be hugely embarrassing for them and for them as individuals also. So they have every stake in this game, every reason to act as spoilers, and I'm afraid given the kind of people they are and the sort of resources they have, we've got to be very prepared for the possibility that things could go wrong. And of course, the other side that we've got to keep a very careful eye on, as I said, are the Israelis, who have in some ways a similar interest.
Well, let's hope that Trump can weather this storm. I think this is bigger than the entire RussiaGate hoax.
It's by far bigger. It's
far if Trump can weather this storm.
It's far and away bigger. If he's able to pull this one off, then I think he will look a much stronger and more confident president than he has been up to now. We will see. But as I said, this is a massive challenge, and the next couple of weeks will be extremely tense. But Russian diplomacy is working very hard, as you said. And as I said, I think the Turks themselves are probably now calculating that it is now in their interests to find a compromise, which is why we see both the Turks and the Kurds off to Moscow.
And I think domestically in the U.S., Trump definitely has, from looking at the poll numbers, the approval rating numbers, Trump definitely has the support of his base with this move to pull out the U.S. troops. So he does have a strong support there as well.
Absolutely. A fact, incidentally, which is grossly underreported in the media, especially in the United States and Britain.
Right. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran, thank you for your insight on what's going on in Damascus. And guys, there's a reason that we use the word Damascus. We're trying to avoid any type of demonetization there. So Alexander, you did a great job. And on that note, guys, please donate to the Duran. You will find links to our Patreon and PayPal page and buy a shirt from the Duran shop, 20% off all throughout December. Click that subscribe button. Also, smash that like button and share the channel with everyone you know. Alexander Mercouris, great job. Thank you very much.